Hello everyone, my name is Emmanuel Wanyama, working as Technical Manager with Oetis, Poultry East Africa. Welcome to this session of Poultry Immunology. Today we are going to be discussing maternal antibodies. Maternal antibodies, also known as maternal-derived antibodies, are usually obtained from parent stock through vaccination to protect the chicks against such-related field infections. Of course, the advantage is to protect chicks from acquiring other infections, but they also do come with disadvantages, which principally involve reactions with some of the field vaccines. So maternal antibodies that are derived from parents to the chicks are usually passed on in different levels. And this will vary from chick to chick, meaning that every chick is going to have varying levels of protection with the maternal antibodies. The maternal antibodies also decay from time to time, and they decay at different rates depending also on the species of the birds. For instance, maternal antibodies decay faster in broilers as compared to layers, as we shall see in the next slides. Also remember that maternal antibodies do not provide local immunity. However, they do confer systemic immunity to the birds, which enables them, birds to acquire protection, growth protection against related field infections. As we can see from this graph, as time goes, maternal antibodies are going to decrease with time, and definitely in broilers by around 21 days, maternal antibody will have decayed to almost zero. There are variations between the broilers themselves and also amongst broiler and layers. We will see that standard broiler will definitely will face faster decay of maternal antibodies as compared to, or as opposed to the improved broiler types. But also when you look at the layers, these maternal antibodies take quite longer. This will take quite a longer period of time that may go up to a period of over 6 to 7 weeks when you compare this to the broilers. We should also know that because the maternal antibodies do interact with vaccines, however, they are also important to protect birds in their early stages of life against field infections, which may vary in levels of virulence. We do have, allow me discuss a topic on protective threshold. Protective threshold is principally the minimum required protective maternal antibody titers, below which a given chick is not safe from field disease. But this protective threshold is also going to vary depending on the virulence of the field challenge that may be in the given environment. For instance, in an environment where we do have situations of very virulent infectious bursal disease virus, a chick requires relatively higher protective threshold derived from maternal antibodies, as opposed to that chick in an environment with classical infectious bursal disease. This is simply because classical infectious bursal disease is less virulent, meaning that if a chick has relatively less maternal antibodies, it may be more protected as opposed or as compared to a chick which is in an environment that is faced with very virulent infectious bursal disease. When we are talking about maternal antibodies and vaccination, it's important to note that maternal antibodies are going to interact with certain vaccines, and this also depends on the levels of maternal antibodies, but also on the strength of the vaccine that is being applied. We have a term known as vaccine take threshold. This simply refers to the maximum maternal antibody titer that will allow effective vaccination in the field. So for this case, if the maternal antibody titer is relatively high, it may affect certain vaccines. An example is, if I take an example of a Gumboro vaccine, where we have primarily two types, intermediate class and then the intermediate gumboro vaccine. The intermediate gumboro vaccine is quite less reactive or less virulent, and for that case, it will require a relatively lower vaccine take threshold as opposed to intermediate plus. Intermediate plus vaccine is a strong one, and so it's able to penetrate maternal antibodies at higher, tighter values as compared to the classical intermediate vaccine. And therefore, this also shows why the intermediate plus will definitely give a stronger protection in a field as compared to intermediate vaccine. As we said earlier, maternal antibodies do decay with time, but they also vary in terms of half-life from breed to breed. Standard broiler, for example, after 3 days, the standard broilers will face decaying maternal antibodies after 3 days. When we look at broiler breeders, it takes every 4.5 days for maternal antibodies to decay by half. But relatively, when you compare with layers, this takes an average of about 5.5 days for the remaining maternal antibodies to decay with time. What this means is that for birds where maternal antibodies decay faster, they need relatively a more robust or compact vaccination program to provide sufficient protection, because the rate of maternal antibody decay is quite faster as compared to breeds where maternal antibodies take relatively longer time to decay. In this same chapter, we will discuss in brief immunosuppression, which simply indicates a state of temporary or permanent dysfunction of the immune response that results from insult or damage to the immune system in general, and this leads to an increased susceptibility to disease or delayed or inability for the body to protect against such diseases. Immunosuppression has quite a number of effects to the birds or to the life of the birds and animals in general. For example, it will it will affect livability of the birds, because immunosuppressive diseases, some of them come with mortalities, cases of high mortality, but also because the farmer is losing birds. This means that the cost of production goes up, but also at the same time, immunosuppressive diseases are going to affect growth, and at the same time, they affect the feed conversion ratio of the birds. So the farmer spends more money on feeds, and end of the day acquires less growth patterns in the same flock. Immunosuppressive diseases at the same time are going to attract also secondary related infections, and this may lead to contaminations at the time of slaughter, which all leads to huge losses to the farmer. There are quite many factors that may lead to immunosuppression, but most important, there are 3 major diseases that are really culprits of this, and the 3 include gumboro disease or infectious bursal disease virus, chick anemia virus, and Marek disease virus. So these are diseases which primarily affect the primary lymphoid system, involving the bursa, fabricius, spleen, and the thymus. And because this is the center where the immune response of the chick arises from, when such systems are affected, it simply means that in unlikely event of a disease, the bird is unable to protect itself because it has been depleted of its primary protection system. So in conclusion, it simply means that for us to be able to raise a healthy chick, which is quite strong, growing faster, productive, and with high performance, we need to put certain factors into consideration. Number 1 is biosecurity. This will help eliminate entry and control spread of disease on the farm. Standard vaccination programs need to be planned and followed on the farm and put in place. so that all categories of diseases, including immunosuppressive diseases, are vaccinated at the right time to protect the birds against any of such infections. Good husbandry practices are very important in protecting chicken or animals against disease, and this also goes hand in hand with good housing that includes proper aeration. This also includes limited exposure of birds to harmful toxins like mycotoxins, elimination of harmful gases such as ammonia from the house. This will still keep the birds less stressed and keeping them less vulnerable to immunosuppression or immunosuppressive diseases. Always remember to ensure proper and good nutrition to the birds. This will promote growth. The farmer will be able to raise a strong and productive bird that will perform in the field and definitely bring good results. And lastly, we need to put into consideration and emphasize standard hatchery practices, because some of these infections do arise from the hatcheries, and if not controlled at the hatchery, it simply means that the chick will be introduced to the farm with related illnesses or infections, and definitely failing to perform at the farmer, and of course leading to all losses and mortalities and delayed growth. Thank you so much for your attention.